Buying a used motorcycle can be an incredibly difficult thing to do, especially if you're looking to get one that has a lot of life left, and you can pretty much hedge your bets, almost guarantee that it's going to be a good one. Things like the mileage, the condition, the age. There's lots of things that can contribute to a motorcycle being good, and there's lots of things that can contribute to a motorcycle being bad, and there's lots and lots of variation in between. So in today's video, I'm going to give you some pointers about what you should look out for when it comes to buying a used motorcycle, in particular when it comes to the age and mileage of the bike, and at what point you can automatically say, no, that's not the motorcycle for me. Now, a lot of this is going to be dependent on the type of motorcycle you're looking to buy, what displacement it has. Generally, bikes with more displacement tend to last a little bit longer than bikes with low displacement. Usually because the lower displacement stuff, when you think about 125cc or maybe even 50cc, they're not built to last. They're made a lot cheaper, they're made with cheaper materials, and of course, they're meant to be marketed towards beginners or people that don't exactly have a lot of budget when it comes to buying a motorcycle, because at that point you're not entirely 100% sold on the hobby yet. You're just trying to get a feel for it and see if it's really for you. So you can kind of understand why 125s don't exactly get the best sort of treatment when it comes to manufacturing, whereas bigger bikes, more premium motorcycles, generally more displacement means more premium. So we are going to have a little bit of differentiation here when it comes to the type of motorcycle you're looking to buy. I think for today we'll stick to beginner, intermediate and advanced motorcycles. We'll stick the bikes in those kinds of categories, so beginner 125 and so forth, maybe 500, 650cc for intermediate, 600 to 1000 as advanced level motorcycles. So arguably when it comes to the beginner stuff, buying a 125 is the hardest type of motorcycle to buy. We have done a video about this a little while ago, but because they are built not quite as well, they're built cheaper than the intermediate and more advanced stuff, they don't tend to last very long. And the thing is as well, it's a lot of the times it's very difficult to tell when it's a good 125 because they've been dropped, the fairing has been cracked, the maintenance hasn't been very good because beginner riders don't really know what type of maintenance they need to do on their bikes. And so there's lots of good mixed in with the bad when it comes to buying a beginner motorcycle. And this is why I kind of tend to stick to anything under 15,000 miles is probably okay. Anything over that, it could be okay if it's been maintained, if it's had oil changes every year, or the recommended intervals, depending on whatever manufacturer has built the bike. As long as it's got a little bit of service history, then it could last up to 30,000 miles, but you don't really see 125cc bikes going beyond 30,000 miles. A lot of it is going to depend on your budget and your appetite for risk. Personally, if you want a motorcycle that's going to be near enough rock solid, it has to be Japanese. Some European bikes might be okay, like the KTM stuff might be okay, or BMW don't do a 125, but their A2 variants, they could be good. But try and stick to Japanese with your 125cc. Yes, they're going to be a little bit more expensive, but potentially they're going to be a little bit older, but they're still going to be better quality than if you were to buy, say, a Chinese motorcycle. I mean, this is just a rough estimate, but I think that a Chinese bike doubles in age than that of a Japanese one. So a Japanese bike that is 4 years old is the equivalent in terms of quality and reliability to a Chinese bike that is 2 years old. 4 years old for the Chinese one, 8 years old for the Japanese one, so on and so forth. That's a pretty good estimate of where the quality differences are. Unfortunately, there are lots of Chinese bikes out there when it comes to the beginner stuff. They might look very nice, but honestly, if you can afford it, please stay away from the Chinese stuff. They're not worth it. You could find a really good one, you could find a really bad one. Whereas when you look at the Japanese stuff, even if it's got higher mileage and it's older, the likelihood that you're going to find a decent one is much higher than if you're looking at the Chinese stuff. Speaking of 15,000 miles, that's for Japanese. When it comes to Chinese, anything over 5,000 miles, I'd be very skeptical of. It's not to say that, it's not fixable. Of course it's fixable. It just depends on how much you want to break down, how much you're willing to break down, how much you're willing to send the bike in for repairs. Odds are that if you buy something that's Chinese, it's going to have to go in for repairs far more often than something of one of the Japanese brands. And that includes all of them: Kawasaki, Honda, Suzuki, and Yamaha. But the main ones for me, the best, are by far Yamaha and Honda. If you can pick up a Yamaha Honda, an old one, say from 2010 rather to 2015, with anywhere from 10 to 15,000 miles on the clock, they're going to be good bikes. And I would seriously hedge my bets on those motorcycles. But if you're looking at a Chinese bike that's got about 15,000 miles on it, and it's from, well, 10,000 miles on it, even less than 10,000 miles, and it's from 2015 to 2020, I would walk away, personally. In my humble opinion, from my experiences of Chinese bikes, I would walk away. And unfortunately, they have scarred me. Buying a Chinese motorcycle was cheaper for me, and it was the only thing I could afford at the time. But it probably cost me more in terms of repairs than if I'd have just bit the bullet right at the start and got myself something that may be a little bit older but better quality. I think is certainly the way to go. I know look, it's difficult because the Chinese market is absolutely flooded, the 125cc space. I get it. It's very difficult to find a decent Chinese bike, and it's almost even harder to find a decent Japanese one at the right price. But it is worth it. So when it comes to condition, 125cc beginner bikes, they've all been dropped. They've all had cracks on the fairing, or rust, low maintenance, or no maintenance in some cases, no oil changes, no nothing, because beginner riders don't tend to have the money to maintain their bikes properly. There should be oil changes done every year at the minimum, all right? Chain maintenance should be done every other time you fill up your petrol tank, all right? It really is little things like that that can make all the difference between something that is bad and something that is really good and will last. I wouldn't hold on to a 125cc bike for more than 4 years. Within that time, hopefully, you should have at least got your A2 license, or maybe even your full license. And that's about the amount of time that I would have a 125cc bike for, is what I would recommend anyway. And that's for a Japanese bike. For something of Chinese origin, I wouldn't keep it for longer than 2 years. And that just so happens to be the amount of time that you need from your CBT, from getting your CBT to it expiring. So it's arguably the perfect amount of time to be riding one of those Chinese bikes before you can get onto your A2 or your full license. And let's remember here as well that a good looking condition of a motorcycle on the outside does not mean that it's a good bike. And this is especially prevalent when it comes to the beginner stuff, where the bike has been treated really badly, or maybe it's even been stolen, and so it looks in really good condition, but it's had no maintenance and it's been treated like crap. I mean, yeah, okay, to get any kind of power of a 125, you have to rev it quite hard, but the Japanese stuff is far better at handling higher revs than the Chinese stuff. So again, it's just another one of those things that you need to look out for, need to be wary of. But unfortunately, when it comes to 125cc stuff, you're never going to be 100% sure that bike has been treated well. And again, with the intermediate and more advanced motorcycles, higher revs don't really mean that it's been abused. You know, a lot of these bikes are designed for higher revs, and they're designed to redline fairly frequently. So again, depends on the level of the motorcycle that you're looking to buy, but at 125cc level, the lower the mileage the better, the lower the age the better. But if it's Japanese, you can certainly afford to look a little bit older with a little bit more mileage. So concluding the beginner stuff, make sure that it's got decent service history. If you're looking at a 125, make sure that it looks like it's been semi looked after, make sure the fairing looks okay, make sure it's not been stolen. So do things like a car vertical check. They're not sponsoring us at the moment, maybe one day, because I do use car vertical quite a lot. Whenever I buy a used motorcycle or car, I always use car vertical just to make sure that its history is okay. But yeah, the main things are that service history, and try and stick to a motorcycle that's below 15,000 miles for Japanese, less than 5 to 10,000 miles if it's Chinese. At least if you want to hedge your bets that that bike is going to be a good one and it's going to be decent for the amount of time that you own the bike. Alright, so let's move on to the intermediate stuff. So we're talking A2 motorcycles, so 400cc, 300cc, 500cc, 650, near enough all parallel twins, I think. I don't think there are any A2 motorcycles that are inline fours or triples. The ZX4RR is more of a premium motorcycle, that's an inline four, so I would put that more into the advanced category for the kind of categorization we're using for today's video, I suppose. But yeah, we're talking about parallel twins. We're talking about, anything from 300 through to about 650cc. Overall, these types of motorcycles will last a long time because parallel twins, they're fuel efficient. They're not under a lot of stress most of the time. Their rev limits are lower than the more advanced stuff for the most part. You know, maybe 10, 11, 12,000 RPM or so. But these bikes are absolutely rock solid and ultra reliable. I mean, you could look at something like a Honda CBR 500R or previous generation parallel twins in that kind of A2 category from Honda. Same with Yamaha. You can look at an R3 or an MT-03. They're really, really solid bikes, and honestly, like, yeah, they're a little bit on the cheaper side from new, but they're built much better, and you can tell that just with a little bit of extra money, a little bit of extra ask for the asking price, the quality is so much better on these bikes. And I have seen parallel twins, especially 650cc's, around about that sort of size. I've seen them with lots and lots of mileage. I mean, you can take as a prime example my Kawasaki ER6, which is basically a Ninja 650 these days with the same engine, 650 parallel twin. It's basically the same motorcycle, but it just looks a little bit different to when I owned it. And it's still on the road today. That was a 2008, and by the time I sold it, it was about 15,000 miles or so, and that was 5 years ago. That bike is still on the road to this day, and it probably has closer to anywhere from 20 to 30,000 miles, and that's a fairly old bike by today's standards. But you could look at something that's even older, something that's a little bit newer, and it's the same story. Almost anything at A2 is pretty reliable. When it comes to the KTM stuff, so you've got the RC390 and the Duke 390, I think they're single cylinder designs, but I'm not sure on their reliability, and I'm not quite as confident in saying that this is the kind of target you should be aiming for when it comes to a good KTM, or maybe even a good BMW. Is it the G310? I think the BMW make. I say BMW, they're made in India. So whereas all the Japanese are made in Japan, they're made in Japan and Japanese factories. That might not make such a big difference, really, at the end of the day when you think about it. But I'm always going to stick up for Japanese stuff, always. So when you look at the Suzukis, the Yamahas, the Kawasaki's, the Hondas, they're all going to be not better necessarily in terms of the riding experience, but certainly you're going to have more chance of it being a good motorcycle. They do suffer if they're not maintained properly, if they're not looked after properly. They can also suffer just as much as any other motorcycle, but on the whole they tend to be more resilient to wear and tear and owner neglect than European bikes do. So in terms of the mileage, when it comes to the mileage of a motorcycle at this intermediate category, honestly, any kind of mileage is gonna be okay. You could even look at something that is super high mileage, so like 60, 70,000 miles, it might still be okay, as long as it's not too old. Mileage on a newer bike is nowhere near as damaging as mileage on an older bike. Usually the combination of age and mileage is what kills a motorcycle, but if it's a fairly new bike, say within 5 years old or so, and it's done 50,000 miles, that is still a decent bike. You could get a motorcycle that is 20 years old with 50,000 miles and it's on its last legs. So it really does depend on the age of the bike rather than the mileage. I'm not so concerned about the mileage as I am the age. But if you, again, want to guarantee that you're getting a reliable motorcycle that's going to last you, I mean, on an A2 license almost indefinitely, you could ride an A2 bike indefinitely, I would say that anything up to 10 years old is what you should be aiming for. So from now, the time I'm posting this video, so 2015, and anything up to 30,000 miles, I think is going to be okay. honestly. That's especially true with the 650 parallel twins. Thereabouts. Those motorcycles are certainly going to be of a much higher quality, and they're certainly built to last a lot longer than maybe some of the 300s or something like that. But even for 300s, 400s, 500s, these bikes are still really reliable. And I have a sneaky suspicion that's why these A2 motorcycles are going up in displacement, because you can almost guarantee a longer lifespan, longer service life of a motorcycle with higher displacement than if it has a smaller displacement, because the engine doesn't have to work as hard to produce the same amount of power. You know, you don't have to rev it as high, things like that. So things like a Ninja 300, Ninja 400, Ninja 500, CBR 500R from Honda, R3, MT-03, those are all fantastic motorcycles. And again, looking up to about 30,000 miles, about 10 years old. That's if you want to guarantee that the bike's going to be okay. There's going to be lots of variants in there, so you might find some bikes that are more than 30,000 miles, but a little bit newer. You're going to find bikes that are less than 30,000 miles, that are a little bit older. I would personally stick to something that's newer with more mileage than something that's older with less mileage, personally. Especially if it's got decent service history. Again, it always goes back to service history. When it comes to us, we're not exactly the best at buying motorcycles, because I'm usually trying to get the bottom of the barrel stuff, you know, really getting the cheapest stuff I possibly can that's got an MOT and that could in some way have a sort of life with us. And, you know, the amount of bikes that I buy with no service history, the condition is iffy to say the least, and they've still been good. I mean, okay, we're talking about more advanced level motorcycles here, but it's a case of do as I say, not as I do. I mean, I do what I do mainly for content reasons. You know, if a bike breaks down or something like that and I've got to fix it, that's content. But yeah, you guys, that is pretty much where you should be looking when it comes to intermediate level motorcycles. Anything up to 30,000 miles and anything up to 10 years old, you can pretty much guarantee that it's going to be decent. You are going to have some things like tire wear, maybe brake pads, things like that, oil changes, the general kind of stuff that you're going to have to do to any motorcycle anyway. But the overall running of the bike, you shouldn't get any surprise bills from your mechanics with these types of bikes. And the good thing is about this is that in this intermediate category, you're not going to find any kind of Chinese motorcycle, and near enough any European, American, Japanese made A2 motorcycle or intermediate motorcycle is going to be pretty damn reliable. So finally, we've got the advanced level motorcycles, and my first venture into an old, actually high mileage. I mean, when you look on Google what a high mileage motorcycle is, you'll find that it will tell you 30,000 miles is considered a high mileage motorcycle. I've bought several at this advanced level: the Blackbird, the CBR 600RR, the Triumph Daytona 955i, the ZX9R from Kawasaki. All of these bikes that we've had over the last 4 years, they've all been rock solid. So to be honest with you, you can't go wrong with an advanced level motorcycle on its age, on its mileage, condition. Even then, I mean, the Blackbird isn't in the best condition. The ZX9R wasn't in the best condition. The 600RR was in better condition, but I did pay more money for that. I paid, I think, about $3,000 for that bike at the time. So I paid for a better quality bike in that instance. But on the whole, it's very difficult to go wrong with an advanced level motorcycle at any age, any mileage. There is a limit, all right? Like, for example, if you're looking at a bike that's got about 45,000 miles on the clock and it's over 20 years old, the chances of something going wrong with that bike are significantly higher than if it's a motorcycle that is of the same age with less mileage, or maybe more mileage that's newer. All right, so it could be 60,000 miles, but it's 15 years old. All right, that could be a better purchase than, you know, than something that, like on the Blackbird, for example, 44,000 miles on the clock, well, 44,500 miles on the clock, 2002, so well over 20 years old. And I've got that FI light coming up, which I'm pretty sure is an ECU issue. We are going to have a video coming out soon of my troubleshooting processes, trying to fix it, but we haven't quite got there yet. But these things are going to happen with older bikes. And to be honest, in the case of the Blackbird, it's not skipped a beat. It's been absolutely rock solid, and I've been perfectly happy with that bike, despite the fact that it's got an FI light. And when you read through forums and things, people will say like, oh, the FI light came on and it would just die on me all of a sudden, you know, without warning, things like that every once in a while. That's not happened. So you can kind of take it or leave it, I suppose, to some extent with this stuff. Like, some of these issues aren't that bad on these bikes, and it doesn't really affect the overall running of the motorcycle. It might affect you selling the bike on afterwards, but in terms of your enjoyment, your satisfaction of the bike, it's not going to affect you at all. So little things like that, honestly, and that's at the cheap end, guys, all right? You're talking less than £2,000 for a 20-year-old motorcycle with supposedly high mileage. That's a trade I'm happy with, all right? Okay, but for the amount of bike that you're getting for the money, it's not an issue for me. But if I were to have some boundaries, I think that this is where I would put them. So for me, no more than 50,000 miles, even though there are plenty of examples of these older bikes that have gone well up to maybe 80,000 miles, depending on the motorcycle, especially the bigger stuff. You know, when you're looking at the Blackbirds, the Hayabusas, the ZZR 1400s, these bikes can go for a very long time. Because again, most of the time, they're not really being pushed. You know, they're not being revved sky high all the time. And to some extent, with 600s, that is the case. Their engines are designed to be redlined almost all the time. So again, it depends on the motorcycle, depends on what it was built for, depends on where the power band is of the bike. If the power band is higher up in the rev range, then the likelihood is that the manufacturers designed the engine to be running at those higher RPMs for a long period of time. So when it comes to things like that, I'd say, yeah, 50,000 miles is probably my cutoff point, depending on the bike. Like, if it's a 600, for example, I'd be looking closer to maybe 40,000 miles as my cutoff point. But again, you're talking variances in condition, in price, in maintenance. Even then, you guys, when I've been buying bikes that have got no service history, I don't like buying bikes with no service history, but for the bikes that we bought for the channel, they've all been very good. And I don't know if that's luck or if it's just because I know what I'm looking for when it comes to a decent motorcycle. I know I've bought them and sold them enough times now to know what's a good bike and what's a bad one. Maybe that's the case. I'm not sure. But so far, all the bikes that we've had, all the old bikes, have been very, very good. I've been very, very pleased with the performance, the value for money, all that kind of stuff. But none of these bikes have reached 50,000 miles. So there's plenty of options out there for less than 40,000 miles and less than 30,000 miles. My Daytona, for example, less than 30,000 miles, and it cost me 1,850 quid. That was it. Very, very cheap. Loads of bike for the money. And there are plenty of examples like that. And okay, with this category, I'm not going to encourage you to just buy Japanese. All of the motorcycle brands at this level are building premium motorcycles, and even premium bikes, as they age, they're still premium. They're still well built for the most part. Whenever you're looking to buy a used bike, obviously you always do your research beforehand, look in forums about common problems that you might find with that particular motorcycle, so you know exactly what you're looking for before you even look at it. But honestly, near enough any motorcycle that is up to 25 years old, maybe even a little bit older, something from the late 90s, is still probably going to be decent. So, I mean, if you're looking at the mileage and the condition and the service history, that'll probably tell you everything you need to know. And until you get there and you actually try and ride the bike, you test ride it, or maybe even just start it up, that's when you're really going to know whether if it's good or not. And I've had a couple of experiences like that in the past where I've had to walk away from motorcycles, which on the face of it, they looked okay in terms of their mileage and their overall condition. But when I got there and I tried riding them, they weren't good. They weren't good at all. And I knew that immediately. So unfortunately, you can't just look at one of these old bikes, look at the specs, look at the service history, and almost guarantee that it's going to be a decent one, especially if you're looking at anything pre-2005. You have to go there and test ride it to make sure that, or at least turn it on, get it up to operating temperature, make sure that everything sounds okay. It's not like, you know, some really harsh knocking noises coming from the engine. When it comes to knocking noises or bad noises, you'll know straight away that it's not meant to sound like that. Motorcycle engines, especially Japanese ones, should be smooth as butter. They might have little tippy taps from the valves opening and closing, but they're very small sounds compared to the knocking that you might hear on bikes that have got timing problems or something like that. These are the things that you'll only find out when you actually go and look at the bike yourselves. But honestly, I would not be put off from an age of a motorcycle or the mileage of a motorcycle when it comes to this advanced category. There are loads out there that are really good value for money, and there's loads of good ones. Loads of good ones. Out of the 4 bikes that I've bought that have been old and no service history, not in the best condition, out of the 6 bikes I've looked at, should I say, only 2 of them have been bad. And they've been obviously bad. And that's the thing, when it comes to these advanced motorcycles, if an issue is there, if an issue is present, it's very obvious that it's there. It's very difficult for an owner to hide an issue with one of these advanced level motorcycles. A lot of them will either run well or they won't run well at all. And it's very easy to spot the difference between the two. But on the whole, you know, maybe 70 to 80% of these older bikes, at least maybe 2000 to 1997, 1998, are going to be all right still. They're still going to have plenty of life left in them, at least a couple of years, a good couple of years life left. It wouldn't surprise me if you'd be able to get that sort of value for money, because I've done it myself. And I wouldn't personally pay what I pay for the bikes. I would pay a little bit more, get something a little bit newer, something with a little bit less mileage. There's plenty of examples out there with less than 30,000 miles that are in decent condition that you might have to pay £500, £1,000, maybe £1,500, £2,000 more than what I paid, but you're going to get something that you can almost guarantee is going to be rock solid. And that's why I enjoy buying advanced level motorcycles. They're the easiest used bikes to buy because you can always tell if it's good or not. Whereas when you look at something like a 125 at the opposite end of the spectrum, it's much more difficult to tell because the variance in quality is... There's not as much quality control when it comes to 125s, especially with all the Chinese brands that you can find now at 125cc level. There's just not as much quality control as there is with the more advanced and more expensive stuff. Just remember that things that were bought new for a lot of money are still going to be good for longer than something that was bought cheaply. You know, you're never going to see a 125 that lasts 25 years, 50,000 miles on the clock, and still runs perfectly. You're never going to find that. There might be one example in a million where that is the case, where it's got perfect service history and all that. I find it very unlikely that you're going to find something like that. But that is pretty much where I draw the line, you guys, when it comes to buying used motorcycles. Those are the points at which I either buy and commit or walk away. Very rarely when I look at a motorcycle, if it's in perfect working order and it's a good one, I will buy it. I'm not one of those people that will look at a motorcycle and think, oh, I'm looking at another bike, so I'll leave that one for now and have a look at this other bike. If I'm committed to buying a motorcycle that I have an interest in and it's good, I'm going to buy that bike. I don't really think about it an awful lot, and it's served me well so far, especially when it comes to buying the advanced stuff, the 600s, 750s, 900, 1000, you know, all those types of bikes. A lot of them are very good and very good value for money. It does get harder with the 125cc stuff, but the same principles apply, you guys. If you stick to those kind of levels, those walk away points that I mentioned in today's video, I think you'll be absolutely fine when it comes to buying a 125cc motorcycle. And we do have a dedicated video. We go through my wife's Ninja 125 and we look at all the bits and pieces that I would look at when it comes to buying a 125. Yes, it is harder, but it's not impossible. If you know what you're looking for, you can find a really good 125cc bike that will last you as much time as you need, and you'll have all the fun in the world without having to worry about it breaking down on you every 2 minutes, as you would with a lot of these Chinese bikes. But at the same time, I give Chinese bikes a lot of stick. Fair enough. But you can still find decent Chinese bikes as well. I'm not counting them out entirely. It's just even harder to find a Chinese bike that you can almost guarantee is going to be a decent one. That's all I'm trying to say here in today's video. And a lot of people, like myself, when I started riding bikes, Chinese was the only option that I had because I couldn't afford anything else. But if you look a little bit older with a little bit more mileage and it's Japanese and it's the same price, I would always hedge my bets towards the Japanese bike than the Chinese bike. But that's just my opinion on all this, you guys. You let me know down in the comment section below what you think, what advice you would give to people who are looking to buy a used motorcycle. Definitely let everybody know down in the comment section. I really appreciate it. I love hearing from you guys, and I'm sure that anyone who's looking for used buying advice, I'm sure they'd appreciate it as well. But as always, if you've found this video informative, go ahead and leave that like, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss any more videos like this from us. And as always, thanks again, take care, ride safe, we'll catch you all in the next video. Have a good one.